spelling of my name, it'd be Cody. My story is both simple yet not simple. The church was a very crucial role to the way I grew up. I don't think there was a moment or a time, at least growing up, where it wasn't really church centered or church focused. I indoctrinated type of sense of mind at a very young age, between 5.5 to 7.5 years old. Unfortunately, having that kind of upbringing can take you away from just being more aware of what's going on around you. I could say that, hey, I love you. Problem was that a lot of my love was centered around, say, Christ or something having to do with church. So you weren't really sure if it was coming from you, yourself, or from something higher than yourself. So it really does mess with your whole psyche of just the outlook of life, whether it's inward, outward, or just conversation you might be having with yourself, like, do I actually enjoy this? Or am I supposed to enjoy this? When I was maybe 10 or 11, it was one dark night, basically doing like homework or something. Somehow it went from not understanding something to the conversation of like adoption coming up. I don't know how that comes up from that. So my first cousin is the one who actually adopted me. I was more used to divorce and death and a family than I was to happier times growing up. I already didn't have a mother or father bond growing up, and I've never actually known what that's like. As a kid growing up, you're not really able to see necessarily what is actually good and bad for you, especially from a spiritual sense of mind. So you can feel like everything's fine. The problem is that a lot of times it comes down to your own mindset of, well, is what I'm doing wrong or is it spiritually wrong? When you are going through a cultish-like mindset, it's almost like you're living under this glass ceiling. You're unfortunately trapped in like this snow globe, but it's not really snowing, and it's not really pretty to look inside. Because if you're not really told anything else other than what you're being told repeatedly, kind of like in a circular motion, it's really hard to see anything outside of it. Because there's no breaking point within that circle. It's always just the same thing repeated. My half-sister, being adopted, she was a year older than me. For a long time growing up, we were all each other had, going through divorce. And obviously we went to the same school. We both started basically at the same time, only a year older. As far as I can remember, it was literally just the start of a year where I became just a little bit more aware of what's going on. Still being taken advantage of, bullied, pinned down almost every day after school. So it's still happening, but you're slowly getting so fed up of a situation that it's like, it's slowly mounting up. Because it wasn't until I basically was hitting puberty that I started to develop and get bigger than my sister. And there was a certain moment where repeatedly after school, with either getting pinned down or taking advantage of me, whether it was just getting bullied or literally just being physically taken advantage of, that something inside of my own mind realized, oh, I am now, whether it was just either weight or just physically stronger, bigger than my older sister. And that's not like oh, well, now I'm the bully. It's just a mindset of, I don't like what's happened to me anymore. And I now realize I have the power to take back the scenario in my own liking. And it's almost like just consciously aware physical sense, even just as a teenager or going into my teenage years. So anywhere from 12 to 13 years old, it's like, I'm stronger now. So it's almost like a just little switch in your mind that even though you're being taken advantage of repeatedly, I think just according to the end of the year for school, it's like, I had enough. I remember one time after school, after being done, it's like I just had enough. So my body was like literally catching up with my mind or my heart spiritually. And it's just, I literally flipped a switch, and it wasn't like a violent or a aggressive switch. It was just like, almost like a little confidence boost. But toward later the year, it was on a Friday right after school. And I don't know if this was my sister's way of maybe whatever she was going through to get out on me. But literally getting pinned down, and it occurred to me as I'm being close to being taken advantage of once again. It's like, I didn't want this to happen again. So I literally just said enough. I didn't quite yell like violently at her, but in her direction. And I basically just forced her off of me. And then I guess she wasn't really aware of what I was doing because it was very sudden and surprising. But she tried getting back on top of me again. I was just like, and I basically threw over my shoulder and then kind of just threw her on the ground. And from that moment of just snapping, whether it was mentally, it definitely wasn't spiritually because I was still pretty spiritual, but it was more of just, I didn't want this to happen anymore. And it's like my body just caught up with my mind. It's like, yeah, we don't want this happening anymore either. So let's kind of gang up with each other and stop this from happening ever again, at least in that scenario. So did I love her even as I was forcing her off of me? Oh, of course. I think you can love someone or something, but still want to put a stop to it, still not want anything to do with it anymore. I think it manifested both in good ways and bad ways. Obviously, it gave me a bigger picture on life when it came to things of a physical nature. But growing up, then later to my teen years, to my young adult life, still being very heavily involved with church like several days out of the week, it's unfortunately, with life still happening and other things in life, for my case, it did kind of get a little bit pushed down, not necessarily forgot about, but thinking, well, if I ignore it enough, it'll go away. Fortunately, it's not how it works. The more you ignore something, number one, the longer it'll last because you're not addressing it, or two, the harder it'll be when you do address it, because all the times you could have addressed it, well, now that they have compounded to just making it more difficult to even address it now, let alone dive into it and try to figure out what you were feeling, what you're now feeling. So it's understandable, I think, to not want to think about it. It's kind of push it aside and worry about other things in life. So it did affect me when it came to like being physical with someone, even just through my later teenage years or early adult life. There was always that, even as being someone who identified as a male, there's always that sense of fear, that sense of just never sure if I could feel safe being around a woman, to be honest. It had nothing to do with women at all, and in general, I love women. Counts, it was an amazing experience. Physically, as far as feeling it, it's great. But mentally, there was just a sense of like, I feel like I had done something wrong, even though I hadn't, physically, obviously, with that person. But it was more so just that not knowing what I was feeling as I was crying that made it worse. Obviously, there's times when you can cry out of joy, you can cry out of sadness, you can just cry out of not understanding. You don't even understand what you're feeling and you're crying over it, which is to me a little irritating to myself, because it's like, why am I crying over something I don't really understand? For a man, we very much live in this just very realistic type of point of view where it's like ABC, okay, how do we connect from here? We see the connection and then we make it. But when it comes to like trauma when you're younger, if you don't, as a man, say, take the time to and even try to be open about it, it makes it hard when someone else brings it up. Number one, why it's so important, to me at least, I can only speak for myself, obviously, is that time is short. That time is very, very short. Whether you look at it from a calendar point of view or, from a whatever way you want to look at it, time really is short. And time in just overall sense is just unknown as far as what's going to happen day by day or year to year. There's just not really any way of knowing, okay, this will be a good year, this will be a average year. You just don't really know until the year's over and you're like, another year's over. And even then it's hard to say, was it a really good one or really bad one? That's even hard to say as well. But with the environment that our culture's in today, men feel like they can open up. I tell people all the time, not just for men, but for everyone, if I can leave this beautiful earth one day or whatever day it's time for me to leave it, knowing that I made someone smile a little bit more, made someone laugh a little bit more, made or helped someone see that it's okay to be around for just even an extra minute, an hour, or even an extra day. And I can pass away from this earth knowing that there was a sense of fulfillment in my life, a sense of joy and peace that you can only really get when you do open up. And I feel like that even just, not just for men, but for us human beings in just general, the more you open up, the more you're almost giving yourself like peace and comfort at the same time. I do prefer listening more, to be honest, because like the more I listen, the more I can relate. But when there's opportunities or time to talk on things like this, try to be obviously very respectful of anyone listening, and of course respectful to myself, and just the way that I'm allowing myself to speak about it, which is, I think, key for men in general. You got to be able to look yourself in the mirror and be like, hey, we accept that something happened. We understand that it did, and we have to allow ourselves to feel whatever it is we're feeling. There's going to be times where something just doesn't make sense. I think just as men in general, we do get a little bit out of place, or we just feel out of place when something isn't making sense. And I think for me, one of the things that's kind of ironic, but I like to find clarity in times when things that don't. But I think it's easier to find clarity or just even, to be more cognitively aware when things are making sense. When things aren't going right or things aren't going the way they should be or on like any account, kind of help me to see things in between the lines. And that's a positive thing. But on the negative side, when things are going right, whether it's with a partner or business or friendship, I do have those very negative thoughts. Very, well, should I actually be here? Should I exist just like everyone else? So I think it goes a little deeper than just having that, just for being a man. It comes down to a very subconscious level. So it's kind of the opposite. You think, during bad times, you struggle more. No, not the case for me. It's actually during the good times is when things become a little bit more real. I could be making a lot of money. I could be making a lot of friends, but internally, there does come that cloud of desperation, that cloud of, okay, is this real or not kind of feeling.